this is getting to me more and more interesting, because it's reducing us deeper and deeper down to a basic. And it really should not be difficult for any person to understand, because though the science of this can become very complex, understanding the reality of what this may be is very simple. You and I have been going to church for the better part of our lives, trying to figure out, what is life, what is the nature of life, what is the reason that we exist, why do people die, how do they die, where do they go, is that all there is, as the Peggy Lee song sang years ago? And yet, of all of the years that we've spent in church, with all due respect to people who've given it a good shot to try to get us to understand, we're still at the same place that we were. We don't know any more. I don't know any more from a religious standpoint after many, many years of going into churches than I know now. God made me. Who is God? Nobody knows. For what? To love Him. But then why did He put out a book with all this nasty stuff in it? I don't know. And I'm supposed to read the Bible and believe the Bible, and yet there's about 100 of these with different versions that say different things. Which one? I don't know. All the other people are wrong. Hindus, Buddhists, Muslims, they're all wrong. Only us are right, because we're chosen. And so here we are in this confusion, and we finally come to a point in our lives when we say, nothing that we've ever experienced is silly, basically on from a standpoint of logic as to how life evolves. Then why should our understanding of what we call God be silly? Why can't it be based on some kind of common sense? Not science, because that's too deep for us. We're not scientists. I'm not a scientist. But I think we have common sense. I don't believe that this has to be reserved for people that have college degrees or lawyers or mathematicians. That's silly too. It's just basically common sense. Isn't there some way that we could start to discuss life and its origins and its purpose and its end, if it has an end, and how do we do that? Well, now we've reached a point here of where we're starting to see something pop up in our conversations, whether it be from Jeremy Narby of Stanford University. Yeah, I will. Or John Gray. And here it is. Here it is. In other words, it would appear from what we're learning now, from Gribbins, from Narby, that we're looking at the very thing you've been going to church to understand all of your life. This is the angel, because this is the messenger. You want to see something? See the word up there? The genes. Oh, of course. Certainly. This is Genesis. This is genes. This is genetic. This is Adam and this is Eve. Certainly. This is the serpent. Of course. And this is the construction of the temple. And as it says in 1 Kings 6:8, and they went up with winding stairs. But now, all of a sudden, we have people of science starting to see this. So this isn't hard for you or me to look at and say, this is DNA. Nucleic acid and all that, I don't know what that is. Well, then forget that. It's DNA. And when you start reading about a serpent, or when you start reading about winding stairs, or you start reading about the twins, think of this, because this is you. And you have a unique coded structure of your DNA. That's why you look and are the way you are. And then when we now begin to understand that the DNA in others is basically the same from the standpoint that it can communicate, we begin to understand the nature of life. It's not us as people communicating. It's the DNA communicating with our DNA. So to me, it is really this closest step that we've ever come to understanding the nature of what we call God, of what we call creation, of heaven, of all of these types of things that are religious concepts. We now see scientists starting to say, well, you know, this is interesting because maybe what was being talked about by the ancient people was this DNA. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, in the structure of the DNA, Albert, is it always in fours? Is it always like 4 ladders in the structure?
4
rungs.
Rungs? There's always 4 rungs?
Yes.
Because then you go in the Bible.
Nobody can hear what you're saying.
Okay, then you go in the Bible where.
Hey, start it over again.
All right, I asked Albert if in the structure of the DNA, the 4 rungs, okay? But if you go in the Bible, remember when we had a piece of lint on you. Remember when there was one river and it's split into 4s?
That's right.
And then everything went into 4s in the Bible, and in us we have the fourfold
That's
nature?
very good. That's very good, because are the 4 rungs the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse? That's right. And are they
Everything went into 4.
the 4 points of the compass? And you had provided me, a friend of yours had written up about those types of things. Well, basically, this is what is so good about this. The answer to all of that has to be yes, because there are not 4 horses of any apocalypse. There aren't. So these are symbols of something. There are not 4 rivers. There isn't any place called Eden. It's a mythological place. It's like Oz. It is Oz. And the wizard is the Wizard of Oz. I mean, it's all the same thing. So you follow the twisting yellow brick road, which is the same as that. You know. And then we start to look at all of these things and, my goodness gracious, this isn't hard to understand. You could be 19 or you could be 90, or it's not hard to understand. It's very beautiful to understand. It's very simple to understand. So when I was speaking to the doctor that I go to, and I talked to him about this, he's very into this because he's into meditation and he's into all natural healing substances. He doesn't prescribe drugs unless it's an absolute necessity. He's a medical doctor, but he knows all of this stuff. So he was one of the few doctors that I've ever talked to, or that when I spoke to him about this, he looked and he really listened to every word. And when I spoke to him about DNA, as Dr. Jeremy Narby of Stanford University, he looked at it and he said, you know, this opens up a whole new thing. You know what he said, Albert? If the DNA gets inside of these people of the jungle and talks to their DNA, and they gain knowledge from that, what is the DNA of a virus saying to us? What is the DNA of a virus saying to our DNA? He says it opens up a whole new thing. So I walked out into the parking lot and I was thinking about this. And then I walked back in, you know, and I said, I got to see this guy. You know, you want a doctor's office, but I just walked in and I said, I got to tell you something. And I said, you prescribe natural substances from plants and stuff. If, as Dr. Narby said, the natural substances in the DNA that the jungle people took communicated with their DNA, and they were then given information about healing, why would be, if you, doctor, prescribe a substance for me, wouldn't it be logical then that the DNA in that substance would talk to my DNA? And then I would be given knowledge about my well-being. Now, the ultimate decision as to whether I am going to accept, reject, is up to me. But the fact would be that, yes, the DNA in a natural substance would communicate with the DNA in your body. And then the continuing thing would go on. What would happen? The breaking down of the amino acids, the nucleic acid, the DNA, so forth and so on, triggers inside of a message inside. An encrypted message suddenly becomes decoded, because that's why you look the way you do. You look the way you do because the DNA message is decoded and given to the cells in your body, and your hair is the color it is, your nose is the way it is, and all of these things, because it's your DNA. Well, then I'm taking this new DNA from this plant in the form of a pill. Well, now it's getting into me, and then is this plant that the doctor prescribed for me communicating with my DNA? And if so, then of course the decoded message is going to be broken down, and it's going to provide understanding, knowledge of some kind to me. So it just totally opens up a whole new understanding of not only from where we're coming from what is God, and all this kind of business, but how does healing occur? How do you get sick? Do you get sick because of something that hurts your body, or because there is a negative DNA inside of you screaming at your DNA? And the two DNA start warring back and forth. There's a yin-yang inside of your body, and the two DNAs start warring back and forth, and and then you have this this thing develop.
Just go before Albert, because it's right where you're.
Absolutely, you
Okay,
can go
now
before Albert.
In the article on the plants, it said that some plants, the DNA would allow the virus, and in others it wouldn't. So it depends upon what you're just like saying now.
Yeah, like Al said in what he read from Gribbins, it is the DNA that unzips the I guess the message, of the encrypted message, and so it would be based on that. Yes, sir.
Just a point. People may not be aware of these things. Everything that you say about DNA, etc., it does not apply to things that you eat.
Okay.
Because once you digest that, that's it.
Yeah, but
So.
let me ask you this.
Some substances
Yeah.
are protected,
Right. Now,
and even go through the stomach, they're still active.
yeah. So, in other words, like Al was saying when he read from Gribbins earlier, you weren't here at the time, this DNA, just like in the Narby situation, the enzyme in the stomach can be neutralized.
Or whatever.
Yeah,
What happens actually is it's a shield.
yeah,
That's why you needed two compounds. That's what you talked about.
right. So then if, well, we're talking from the standpoint of this doctor prescribing a particular natural substance, the natural substance would have to be shielded from that enzyme. Good, very good. All right, what is she saying now? Let's put this-
Belladonna. Oh,
Yeah.
yes,
I
sure.
want- Well, I want him to,
Why don't you stand up so people, we'll get the back of your head to people. Come on,
Yeah.
my best clothes, right? Sure, you couldn't pick on me when I'm dressed.
come over here. Can you see?
Oh,
Over this way a little
oh,
bit.
by all means.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, Albert should really talk about the medicines that were derived from natural substances, like the belladonna came from, what was it, lobelia? Lobelia. Nicotiana has nicotine in it, and I can't think offhand, but Digitalis comes from foxglove. Thanks, John. But there are many things that we take on a regular basis that came from plant life originally, and of course Albert worked on that.
Protection of these compounds. You
Yes.
see? Like
That
you were
would have to
talking.
protect the compound from the destructive enzymes in the body. Yeah, very good. Okay. So we're getting an idea then. To me, it's fascinating because it takes itself to me, to the point of how does, the influence, the external influence of a meditation work, I know when I think of all these things, and what Albert's just talking about, what Al read from Gribbins, you go back to the 5th chapter of Genesis, and it says, this is the book of the generations of Adam, which I am, completely convinced that Adam is simply a mythological term for Atom. In the day that God created man, in the likeness of God made he him. Well, if you're made in the likeness of God, and if we say, well, that's true, and then we learn from Narby and from science that our DNA sends out messenger particles. It does. Your DNA emits a photon. There is light energy that comes out of your body, and it's coming from your DNA. So there's a messenger particle, because a light photon is a messenger particle. There is a messenger coming from you that its origin inside of you is at the point of the messenger, which is DNA. Well, if that's the case, and it is, and if the Bible is right that you're made in the image and likeness of God, then God's DNA also sends out messenger particles. Okay, now, look what we found. We've read about angels and their messengers. But now we're learning something else. We're learning that the messengers that we called God's angels are actually light particles, messengers, coming from a higher source, a stronger source, a cosmic source. So now we find out that in that point, in that way, that these light particles contain DNA, which is our own DNA, which is transmitted via candle power. And then if we're in the image and likeness of God, then God's DNA is what we're meditating to receive. And of course, it's even difficult for me to think of God. That's not logical. The very word is not logical. I have a strong problem with that. But I'm not having a problem with the essence of what we call God or Allah or whatever you want to call it. I have a problem with the fact that I've been raised all of my life in what basically is interpreting. I'm going to say it's nonsense, or we're interpreting mythological symbols literally. That's where Jeremy Narby had such a problem in the jungle, because these people were telling him that the plants are talking to them. And he's saying, this is nonsense. And then he's reading books, trying to research, and he's reading about serpents and stairs, and he said, what the heck does this have to do with anything? This is nonsense. I went through the Bible 4 times, read it through 4 times, and every time I went through it, it became more repulsive, because all I read was violent stuff. I mean, the Congress just voted to put, it's okay to put the 10 Commandments back in the school. This is going to stop people from killing one another. But if you read the next page of the Bible after the 10 Commandments, there's 16 commandments of how you can kill people, with descriptions on how to do it. Hit them in the head with a rock or whatever. And of course, can you take that out and say, well, this is from God, so we should put it on the wall, and not take out the part that says, kill all the little boys, and kill all the women that have had sex, but the little girl children that have not, keep for yourself? What do you do? That's the same guy wrote that as wrote the 10. So, of course, it's all symbolism. Yes. It's all symbolism. It's not... Let me say where we make a big mistake. Where we make a big mistake is we get into New Age. And, everybody gets unfortunately lumped into a title. Well, there's a lot of people in New Age who have come out of fundamental religion and abandoned the Bible because they say, no, I don't want to know anything about the Bible. You're making a big mistake. Because this book happens to be a mystical Greek document written in a coded language about astronomy, astrology, and anatomy. Huh? I'm echoing a little bit. Remember Echo? Did you ever know about Echo? There was a fellow who was enamored with himself. He thought he was the Adonis. I mean, he just strutted around, you know. He was something. And so the gods said, you know, you're much too involved with yourself. We're going to send you up into the mountains. And when he went up there, he heard a voice coming from the woods. And this voice would call out to him and, you know, say, I want you to touch me. Touch me. And he wouldn't have anything to do with her. And because he wouldn't have anything to do with her when she came out of the woods, you know, she went back into the woods and she died of a broken heart. But her voice continued. And you can hear her voice to this day. If you go into the right places in the woods and the canyons and yell out, hello, you'll hear her say back to you, hello, hello. Her name was Echo. And he went back and just sat there and looked in a pond and stared at himself and said, I am the cat's meow. I am something. But as he started to look and look and look, he just became so absorbed that he couldn't do anything else, and he died. And the gods said, whatever happened to him? He never came back. And they went up to the little pond, and there was a flower growing by the pond. And the flower was named after him, which is called Narcissus. And basically narcissism is, you know, becoming, you know, obsessed with oneself. But he then was able to free himself of that and so forth and so on. But Narcissus was involved with the Echo. So you try it. Next time you go into the mountains or something, you call out and she'll be there. She'll talk back to you. That was good. It was an echo. Yeah. So then we're thinking, you know, and we should try to stop, and we should try to nurture ourselves about this DNA business, because we're so close here. We're so close because not only are we close to understanding the riddle and understanding the nature of God, but you're very close physically to these occurring things. You're very close to this tremendous summer of 1999, which is going to very shortly produce tremendous solar flares on the 11-year cycle of the sun, which is going to impact your communication systems. You're very close to Y2K, which is going to impact many aspects of your life because you have advanced to the computer realm. And you're very close to the magnetism to touch the Earth from supernova 1987A and Eta Boreana that we talked about a couple of weeks ago, and very close to, you know, the impact of being felt from Pluto and so forth. So all of these things that are happening because you've reached this Aquarius, this time of consciousness. And what changes consciousness? What changes consciousness? We say, well, you know, we've talked about it. Well, the planets move from here to there, and they have a difference in the magnetism and the angles of light, and that's all true. But remember what Narby told us, remember what the scientists are trying to tell you, is basically what changes consciousness, we're starting to find, is DNA. Because it was the taking into themselves by the people of the jungle of DNA that allowed their consciousness to change. And taking this all back to its base, to its very beginning, what did the National Aeronautics and Space Administration say? They said that when the angle of light angel, light comes from above, God. It touches the green of the earth, chlorophyll, plant, hema, body. It stimulates the amino acids, the nucleic acid triggers DNA, the encrypted message. So the angle of light is a messenger bringing a new message to the earth and to you, and that comes not from the Bible, but from the National Aeronautics and Space Administration. And not only that, you have it in your material that I gave you. So you have scientific documentation from NASA that this DNA comes from above. So then we understand, when we looked at the double helix of DNA here, we understand how the ancient religions said that all creation comes from twins. We've never, to me, finding specific passages in the Quran is very difficult. They don't have, I haven't found a concordance or something that can take you right there. But we have some friends who are Muslims, and one in particular, now she's back in Turkey, said she was going to get me the passage and probably forgot, where it says that all of God's creations in the Quran says it all comes from twins. Well, that's the twins of the double helix, the winding stairs of DNA. So creation is from DNA because of the light energy flowing from the universe, bringing to life whatever it touches. So what is it then? What are these angles of light? They're God's DNA. If you're willing to accept the word God, most of you are so, I don't want to say brainwashed, but that's basically what we are. We cannot conceive of the word God without thinking of some man sitting up behind a desk somewhere on a planet. That's what we think of. Our Heavenly Father that only likes us and doesn't like all of the other people down there. and they got us convinced. We were convinced. I mean, you know, we're the good guys. All the rest of them are bad. So then we sit in meditation and we talk about receiving light. Well, how would you receive light? Well, the pineal gland of your brain is the light receptor of the body. Would it seem, the word receptor means the point where you receive. And that's the pineal gland of your brain. So then what happens? If through that light receptor you are receiving angles of light, then you are seeing God face to face, because that angle of light is God's DNA. And then you look in the Bible, and Jacob, who never existed, says, I have seen God face to face. And what's he call the place where he's seen God? Peniel. I mean, so you don't have to be a rocket scientist. It's there. And that's very interesting. So as Narby says, when the jungle people took DNA inside of themselves, they were instructed by the plants. This is what's so critical about this. They weren't eating something and saying, well, I got indigestion, I'm going to grab this and see it. They were instructed. And the plant said, don't go over there and take that one. Go over there and take that one. How were they instructed? Was there a little plant that, you know, opened its leaves and said, of course not. It came to them as, you know, maybe it's this one. That's all. Maybe it's this one. But it was that one. They were directed on how to do this. So then, if they were directed on what to do by the DNA from the plant, what I am saying to you is, since you're taking God's DNA into you, then you're directed about what to do by the DNA from what we call God. And you'll learn the molecular structure of all things about life, how to heal yourself. And that goes far beyond a question of healing a sore leg or whatever. It goes beyond to the question of really healing ourselves. These human things upon the earth are seriously wounded. Joan came up with this thing about how some people treat bears and these terrible things that go on beyond your comprehension that human beings would enjoy going, sitting and torturing some animal like this and enjoy it as entertainment. Or that, you know, what we just saw in Kosovo was bizarre. People killing each other. They would kill the Albanians because they were Muslims. Now the Muslims are coming back in and they're killing the other ones to get revenge and word and all of these bombs, and for what? You know. So there's a very severe illness that goes through the very essence and the nature of people upon the earth. And these very people that think nothing of doing all of these things are shocked when a kid takes a gun to school. Oh, we better hang up the Ten Commandments. Come on. It was, the Ten Commandments were there many years ago when it all started. The Ten Commandments were up there when they dropped the bomb on Hiroshima. Makes no difference. Who cares? Because what the Ten Commandments say, it's okay to kill. Because if you say to somebody, well, it says thou shalt not kill. Oh, no, that means thou shalt not murder. Wars are okay. I mean, you know, they'll do whatever they want. And just like in the old days when it said in the Bible that it was God's will that we take this town, we say that, you know, God was with us. God helped us in our war. So we all come back, and after with the Marines and the sailors and everybody comes back and they march in church. They have church. So anyhow, all of the things that you're learning now about DNA, communicating with your DNA, religion pays no attention to you, or to it. But to me, if you're going to look in a book like this, the Bible, and say it has any relevance, it means anything, then what does it mean in Malachi 3:1, which is on page 773 if you want to look at it, when it says, "Behold, I will send my messenger, and he shall prepare the way before you." Now, all right, Albert, you're a smart guy, but it says in there, "I will send my messenger, and he will prepare a way for you." If that's the case, then either somebody is going to come with an envelope and hand it to you and say, "Albert, here's your message from God." That never has happened. I mean, does anybody, if anybody ever got a message, you know, in an envelope or, you know, so then how does it happen? I mean, take a kind of obscure statement in the Bible, "Behold, I will send the messenger." How does it happen? Well, it becomes logical now to us. What's happening here is the messenger is an angle of light, and that messenger comes down from above, which we call heaven or God, and it becomes a directive. "He shall prepare, and the Lord whom you seek shall suddenly come to his temple." That's the temple that it says in the Bible is made with winding stairs. And it's the temple which is on top of your shoulders. And then in Matthew 11:10 it says, "For this is he of whom it is written, Behold, I will send my messenger before your face." Well, certainly it's before your face. Do you want to see the messenger coming before your face? Let me show you the messenger coming before your face. You want to see the messenger? Say yes. Nobody said that. Well, gee. Here's the messenger coming before your face. Do you see that? Well, let me get this thing. Well, there it is. What could be on? This is from an ancient temple, thousands of years old. There's the sign of the star, of the cosmic energy, the universe. Here's the angle of light. It's hitting them right in the face. These people knew this thousands of years ago. Read the Bible again. "Behold, I will send my messenger before your face." Bang, right between the eyes. What is it? It's an angle of light. What is that? It's a messenger. What is that? It's DNA. So, I mean, you know, there it is. It becomes pretty obvious what we're talking about. I mean, that particular thing is on a temple in some Egyptian place that's been there for thousands of years. So I will send my messenger before your face, and he'll prepare a way for you. Now, who is the messenger in the Bible? John the Baptist. What happened to him? He had his head cut off. That's very important. Why? Because the messenger is not connected to the mind. The messenger is not connected to the body. The messenger comes from a higher consciousness. So the head is not attached. The head is not part of the delivery of this message. So the messenger to us is this light that you take through meditation, emitted by cosmic DNA that we receive through the light receptor of the body, which is the pineal gland. So when you have an understanding of something, you have a feeling of something, then you've seen God face to face. And then what should you say? I will call the place pineal. Then these people that go to church up here and have the Bible under their arm, I challenge them one day to say, I've seen God face to face. It comes through the pineal. They're not allowed to say that. Even though the Bible says that, they can't say that. Because you see, it's not important for people that in religion to agree with the Bible or to agree with Jesus. It's important for them to agree with their church. And their church does not necessarily agree with either. So here we have primitive people finding out about DNA, and they really have no right to know anything about DNA. That's echoing just a hair. They really have no right to understand anything about DNA. So we have to put the pieces together. And we've been putting the pieces together. Angels are messengers. Messengers are photons. Angles of light. Angels of light. And then what did you see last week? And I gave you about the scientists have sent on a letter in an envelope an encrypted message contained in a period at the end of a sentence, and that period was a dot of DNA. And they stuck it on an envelope in a paper and sent it to themselves. And here it came. And then when they got the DNA, they magnified it 1,000,000 times, and there was the message. So all of these things then came down to what we read last week in that article. And it said conventional computers would not be of much use in reading a DNA microdot. Instead, it might require advances in DNA computing. Why are they talking about that? Because what they have stumbled on is the very same way that messages are sent to you from God. They're now able to send messages to each other. How? Through a dot. Did you ever see a dot? Never? There is the dot. Okay? How did that get to be a dot? You read your quantum physics books. It started off as a wave. And when it was observed, it became a dot. In quantum, it's called a particle. This is called a wave. When you look at the wave, it becomes a particle. When you watch the wave, it becomes a particle. When you watch the wave, it becomes a microdot. What does the biblical Jesus say? What I say to you, I say to all. Watch. What's he talking about? Watch what? Watch your back? Watch your step? Watch yourself. But how does that happen? When you start talking about watching yourself, and you've got a book written in Greek mythology 2,000 years ago, they're talking about the metaphysical watching of yourself. And when you do that, this wave becomes a microdot. This is hard for you to understand. It really is. That's why you have to go and sit down with a book by either Gribbins or sit down with a book by Gary Zukav or some of these other guys. And a very simple thing, in every quantum physics book, there's an item in the index called observation. Look at it. And they talk that when you send a wave of light, when it's observed, it becomes a microdot or a particle. Now, what did they do? The scientists took a microdot of DNA and they blew it up skillions of times, put a message in it, reduced it back, and then put it at the end of a sentence. Mary had a little lamb, dot. Well, that sentence doesn't mean anything. It doesn't. But when you blew up that dot millions of times, there was a message in the period at the end of the sentence. So they transmitted an encrypted message via DNA. That's exactly what's inside of you. That's why people are going to church, wasting their time, because the answer is inside of them. That is why in the Bible, Luke 17:21 says, the kingdom of God is within you. Where? Inside of you, in the DNA, in the winding stairs that go up to the right side. See? And that is why also it is extremely important that you take a different look at meditation. Meditation in the yoga style and all are very good. They're very healthy. It's a healthy exercise. I support it 1,000,000%. Do anything you want. But remember, it's limited to relaxing you, to helping you. It is nothing to do with getting in touch with the universe. The getting in touch with the universe is a form of meditation that people on the earth know nothing about. And what does it require? Watch the wave, collapse it to a particle so that that microdot can be delivered to you via the pineal gland and instruct you via the DNA talking to your DNA. People will say, well, if I go to meditation, I get distracted. Good. Whatever you're doing in meditation, whatever you're trying to do is absolutely wrong. Because there is nothing whatsoever that you can do except be still. If you're still, let me ask you a question. Answer me this. If you think you can do something about meditation and God, you tell me how you're going to get God's DNA to talk to your DNA. How are you going to do that? What kind of meditation are you going to do to get the two DNAs to talk to one another? It has nothing to do with you. Meditation of staring at a candle, that's fine. If you want to stare at a candle, stare at a candle. Meditation of sitting in absolute silence for nothing at all, that's fine. That's fine. But the point here is that when you're putting an effort into anything, you're using your mind. And your mind simply has to be totally distracted from anything that anybody's ever told you is the right way. Because what is really important for you in your body and your life and your existence and your family and everything that you love and treasure is that the DNA of God can speak to the DNA of you. What does that mean? It means that inside of you, you have a serpent. Now you have to link it up with the other serpent, which is God. And what does it become? When your DNA meets the DNA of God, you have the caduceus, which is the sign of healing. And there's nothing you can do about it. You could go into a Buddhist temple to have a meditation and you'll probably run out. Because they hit garbage cans and slang bang and gongs and all that, just to totally distract you from anything that you think you know what to do. Al Vera one time brought me a tape. He says, here, you love this for meditation. It sounded like 35 drunks throwing garbage cans down the back stairs. I said, I can't deal with it. But you see, I was wrong in that even though my Western feeling, I can't do it. Basically, that was exactly what that was for. Me to say, oh, this is ridiculous, this is stupid, I can't deal with this. But if I could have just sitting there and got garbage canned, eventually my whole distraction would have been such that the DNA, the snakes could have encircled it when I wasn't looking and entwined in the message. See? So this is big. Do you know one, it's just funny because when we talk about this, I was talking about music. I just saw it the other day, we were looking at it, sitting on the train watching it. There's a whole page. Do you know who wrote encrypted messages in music? Do you know who wrote encrypted messages in music to trigger chakras in your body? Does anybody have an idea? His name was Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. But his music is a coded message to trigger chakras in your brain. People now finding out all over the world that they're having these encounters with God or whatever it is from Mozart. Whoever knew this? Whoever knew this guy was writing this? All these guys were nuts, yes. They were perceived as nuts.
Did he know about it?
Certainly he knew about it. He knew exactly. He knew in the same way that the guy in the jungle knew. Something, because you can't sit in a dark room like a Mozart or a Beethoven and write this stuff and not be soaring into these different places. You can't do it. Because the very tongues that they selected would trigger responses from the chakras in their bodies. Beethoven wrote the Ninth Symphony. Da, 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 and he was deaf. Couldn't hear. He was deaf and he was nuts. But he wrote probably the most magnificent piece. So what does that tell you? Who really wrote that? Was it the DNA inside of him? Because he had soared to these places, did he receive this light? You see. So it's very interesting. But what is so interesting is that when you talk about these things, and then you open an article in a magazine and you look at the meditations of Mozart and his music and talking about all of these things that happen. So now, you know, like Narby told us that all creation comes from the twins, the DNA. And we look and we see in that material that I gave you, well, it's not that I gave you, but it was on page 27 of the stuff that I gave you that you didn't bring with you. Incidentally, some of you who have a difficult time putting these into, there are some binders on the counter up there which you can take home with you. I don't know where they came from, but they're there. So take them home. But if you look on page 27 of this stuff, what does it say if you look on line 1? Okay. DNA is the principal constituent of genes. Look at the word. Genes. That's you. That is everything about your creation, isn't it? I mean, you know that. Then why is it so hard? Why hasn't any priest or minister or anybody in the churches you've gone to all of your life ever added an IS to it and say, that's what it is? The book of Genesis is the book of genetics. It's the book of genes. And if it's the book of genes, it's the book of DNA. And if it's the book of DNA, that's why one of the early characters in it is a serpent. Of course. And what does the serpent do? What did the serpent in Genesis do? He delivered a message. He was a messenger. And he spoke to Eve. And he said, this guy is full of baloney. Eat the fruit. Because you've got to have knowledge. Oh, he said, if I eat it, I will die. And the snake said, he's a liar. If you eat it, you'll become like him. And you know what? The snake was right. The guy that told her she would die was a liar. And according to the very book that you have, it says the father of lies is the devil. But you've been praying to this guy all your life. Why? Because your church told you to. Not because you knew. They could tell you to pray to Peter Pan, you'd have prayed to Peter Pan. Why? Because you didn't know what else to do. They said Peter Pan is done. So I'm going to fly away with Peter Pan. There's no difference. When people tell you to do this, you do it. Because you don't know what else to do. But genes, the word genes is the root of the word Genesis. The root of the word genetics is talking about creation. And creation comes from DNA. And the serpent of DNA is the serpent in the garden. The principal constituent, and look what it says. The principal constituent of genes, Genesis, and chromosomes, we know about that, the structures that transmit hereditary characteristics. Where did it come from? The garden. Genesis. Genetics. DNA. Of course. What I'm telling you is that the book of Genesis is a totally coded book about genetics, about genes, about DNA. And in the book of Genesis, there's a guy named Jacob who told you about Peniel, and what's the next thing he winds up doing? It tells you about a ladder that goes up to heaven, and angels go up and down. Well, now you know what it is. You see the picture of the ladder. We opened this thing up by looking at a picture of Jacob's ladder. If you didn't see it before, look at it again. There's Jacob's ladder, right there. Can't you see the angels running up and down? There they go. Ooh, ooh. Of course. Red, black, white, pale. Red, black, white, pale. North, east, south, west. Ah! They're all there. The four is there. Everything is there. That's the serpent. But would you have to wait here all of these years to come into Vito's basement to find out? Nobody up there knows. And yet I'm a cult leader. I'm a cult leader, and they're assuring you that a snake talked to this lady. And you should believe it. And I'm a cult leader, and they're assuring you that the fish swallowed the guy and the fish puked and an evangelist popped out, and I'm a cult leader. But that's the way it goes. And then it says in line 4 of what I looked at, number 27, each DNA molecule is a long two-stranded chain made up of subunits called nucleotides containing a sugar, a phosphate group, and one of 4 blah, 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 nitrogen. It's the twins. The long-stranded chain. Okay? Now, in the final sentence is the answer to what Narby talked about, to what Al was talking about earlier. Okay? The complementarity of this bonding ensures that DNA can be replicated. Watch this now. Remember I told you have a twin somewhere? DNA can be replicated. That is, identical copies can be made in order to transmit genetic information to the next generation. Identical copies, not the carbon copies, identical copies. Where is your twin? Oh, what do you mean, where's my twin? I didn't write this. This comes from the Concise Columbia Encyclopedia of Columbia University Press. What is this, a cult? No. What is it, New Age? No. What did they say? DNA, identical copies are made in order to that means there is an identical copy of your DNA somewhere. No matter what or how, whenever they were going to make it come out, it's going to come out you. Mary, there you are. Kathy, Joan, whatever, there is a twin of you. How do I know that? Because it didn't come from religious people. It comes from Columbia University. I believe it.
Billy, then they're talking now to the next generation in the Bible. It says that the sins of
Certainly. Certainly, because as the DNA is somehow defected or made defective because of whatever style or whatever is introduced into it down through the years, whomever, people start having sex, producing children, and that DNA defect starts going down, 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 down to generation after generation. So we are creation, we are God, we create. Did you want to say something, Al?
Isn't this similar to the photon VNC destroying one, it splits, and then it replicates and makes the other one?
Yes. Al said, isn't this similar to the photon as it destroys and splits and replicates into a new one? So identical copies for the next generation. We are all made in the image and likeness of the cosmic one. And identical copies of your previous existence are preserved for your return. And I know it's always difficult for you to understand how this could possibly be, but I'm hoping now that the lotus petals inside of you will start to spread open and that you'll see and understand this. And if you have access to computers, look up DNA. If you have a little, encyclopedia program on your computer, look up DNA. These things are written in very simple terms. It's not difficult to understand, but this is the very basis of everything you've ever gone to church to learn. And also remember that when you talk about your father, your mother, your family. You're talking about your genetics. You're talking about your genesis. And then you expand that to a cosmic, and then you open a Bible, and the very first page is what? Genesis. Just when you start reading it from now on, think of genetics, because that's what it's talking about. And don't look at snakes or right sides and all of that stuff. Look at what is the actual basis inside of the human brain. What is the basis inside of the human body. So people are going to church. They're going to church today, and they're singing songs, and they're taking the message of DNA inside of themselves, and they're missing the entire thing. It's just like going on your computer and America Online says, you've got mail, and not opening it. And that's what you're doing. Because they're missing the entire encrypted message because they refuse to obey Jesus' words about the single eye. It was Jesus of the Bible who said, what I say to you, I say to all, watch. Watch what? Has anybody in church ever told you what to watch? You've gone to church all those years. You wind up at Vito's basement here with me. But you've gone to all of those years. Did they ever tell you what to watch? No. You know why they didn't tell you what to watch? Because they don't know what to watch. But do you know what he said? The same Jesus? He said, if your eye be single, your body will fill with light. Touch the pineal gland. Watch through the pineal gland. Watch through the light receptor. And now the scientists are saying that the light coming out of the body from DNA is of a candle power, and what did Jesus say? Nobody puts their candle under a bushel. Let your light shine. Let your candle shine. It's all there. So what has come down that religion has ignored in just a few years, and I would challenge them, and I would look right in the camera, and I get in all kinds of trouble, and people threaten they're going to cancel a program, they're going to do this and going to do that. I would do all of this stuff, and I would tell you, and I would challenge anybody. Tell me, in just a few years, what have you as a religious group ignored? I'll tell you what you've ignored. You've ignored Pegasus, the white horse of Jesus' return. You've ignored the discovery of the single eye of Jesus in Supernova 1987A. You've ignored the movement of Hades and Charon, which is the very depths of Sheol, the very depths of the underworld, across the river Styx on February the 11th, 1999. You've ignored the advent of the man with the pitcher of water of Luke 22:10. You've ignored the advent of Uranus, the son of man, and the green pan. You've ignored the discoveries of NASA dealing with angles of light and DNA. All connected. All of these things have happened to us in our sky and have been documented by science over the last couple of years. And you, as religious people, have totally ignored it. Yet it is the basis of the very Bible that you have under your arm. All messenger particles are coming down to earth, screaming out to the people of the earth, you have mail! And you haven't opened a damn letter. Not one. And the reason you haven't opened the letters from God is because you've been warned not to touch it by church. And yet, since you're not interested, what you do, you dwell in the Middle Ages superstitions. When people thought that subatomic particles were evil spirits, instead of understanding the true invisible power of cosmic science and quantum physics. And you very easily talk about the Holy Ghost. That's very nice. But you've never sat down to analyze those words and say, what is it? What is a Holy Ghost? The word holy means set apart, not connected, not touched. Totally different. And the word ghost is the center of spiritual life. But I love this one better. From dictionary, a secondary image on a television or a radar caused by reflected waves. You want the Holy Ghost wave to become a Holy Ghost particle, a microdot, and to bring you the message. Then if you do, you'll have to fulfill the words of the biblical Jesus who said, I told you what to do. Watch. Watch what? If your eye be single, your body will fill with light. Single? Yes. I have seen God face to face. I shall call the place Peniel. It's not hard. Thank you very much. We'll see you soon.